Hello and welcome to the 10th episode of the Forrin Podcast. We made it, Mike.
10. I really cannot believe it.
I can't believe it. I can't believe we're still here. This is the podcast where we talk about all things foreign.
Yeah.
Foreigners and countries and stuff like that. And we are 20 weeks old.
Yeah, and 11 episodes in. I mean, this is like official episode 10, but there is an extra.
So there is an extra. That is true.
There's an extra, and there's another extra on the way. In fact, And
tell us about that, Mike.
I interviewed a colleague of mine. I'll see if I can get her name. I was actually quite pleased with myself as a little teaser. I'm pretty much the only person, this is what she said, who actually asked her how to pronounce her name. She's from Bosnia.
Okay.
And her name is Nerma. But see, I can't say it because you have to roll the R. Can you do that? Yeah. Can you roll R's? Nerma. And she's got a great story. She came when she was 8 years old from Bosnia during the war. So we hear about that. And we also hear about how she views her, her own sort of identity, and does she see herself as Bosnian, Danish, and also, which I found really interesting as well, is how perhaps her children feel differently about their identity than she does.
Okay.
And I think that's really quite interesting as well. So that'll be coming out Monday, I believe, the 12th of February. So
Splendid.
And in Denmark, that's like half term. Okay. So our listener has got nothing to do in their half term.
Well, then they've got no. Then our listener has no excuse.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got a bunch of emails to get through this week, and we're actually filming this episode.
Yeah. Hello.
So,
yeah.
So Mike went mental on the socials last week. So you may have seen that if you sign up for our Instagram, you'll see videos of us.
And our YouTube channel, there's shorts.
What's our Instagram again, Mike?
Our Instagram is at Forrin Podcast, believe it or not. That's
splendid. And what's our YouTube? I can't remember.
Forrin Podcast. I believe it is Forrin Podcast. Yeah, I reckon if you type it in, you'll get there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've got a bunch of emails to get through this week. Our requests for people to send us emails have actually backfired because they've all sent us emails.
Yeah.
And what's the first one we're going to tackle, Mike?
Okay. Well, this one is from my brother, and the reason I want to read this out is because I'll make that clear. It says, hi, Mike and Pat. In order that I've known them all their lives. It's nice to be the first foreigner. I've named your faithful listeners, he says here, to email in that isn't part of Pat's family. But he's actually incorrect because he isn't the...
That's what we're about to hear.
Yeah, he's about to hear that there's someone who got in before him, about half an hour, quite amazingly. But anyway, he says, Ari, the last episode, I think you're kind of... the whole kind of talk about political ideology, Pat, last time has got people, got our listener thinking. So it says,
got some traction.
It got some traction, yeah. So Ari, the last episode, if Le Pen did get into power, how would you reconcile yourself living in what would become essentially a fascist state? Wouldn't you want to leave it? Also, you would be seen as un-French in her and her followers' eyes. Therefore, your passport, he claims, would be worthless. I would say, at best, it would delay your deportation. I don't know. The last bit of that seems to be a lot of conjecture, but the first bit, I think, how would you reconcile? I think that's important.
I'm going to respond to that. Thanks for your email, Sam. Thank you very much.
Don't encourage him, Pat. Don't encourage him.
I don't think my passport would be worthless, I think, is the bottom line. I think if Le Pen did get in, I think our passports would actually protect us from what would almost certainly happen. I think probably what would happen would be something along the lines of what happened in America under Trump, in that there would be a hardening towards foreigners in general. Life would become more difficult, and I'm sure some people would be forced to leave, but more likely people who had extreme political views, effectively Islamists. I don't think we would be forced to leave if we were, well, probably as I, sort of I came to think about as I talked to Mike about this like last time, we would probably not be able to be forced to leave on British passports, but I think our passports would actually be worth something in that case. Would I want to leave? To be honest, no. And I think I learned a lot by leaving the UK. And what I learned was that if politics goes sour, I think if you really believe that you should stay and fight, then you should stay and fight. And I genuinely don't think that, I don't regret leaving Britain at all, as is blatantly obvious from everything we've talked about on this podcast. But I also learned that I also caused myself a huge amount of shit by leaving Britain, quite frankly. And I think that Marine Le Pen is worth fighting against, to be honest. So no, I wouldn't actually want to leave. But you would be right. Yeah, France would effectively become a fascist state. I hope that answers your question. I know it's a bit roundabout, and maybe it's not entirely logical, because you are right, and I think logically I would want to leave. I don't want to live under fascism, but also I don't want to allow fascism to ruin other people's lives either. So I would stay and I would fight. There you go.
Yeah, and we have another email.
Let's go.
And this is from my student, Oliver, who's started to listen to the podcast. And he writes here. He doesn't say hello.
I'll say hello to you. Thank you for your email, Oliver. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, hi, Oliver. Anyway, it says here, after listening to your last podcast regarding passport problems, a question came to mind. As a young Dane, I've grown up believing capitalism is crucial for our modern world. However, Pat's anarchist stance met with approval from my social science teacher, which isn't me. I'm his English teacher, so I don't know if he means me, but his social science teacher, she's my colleague called Stina. But anyway, Pat's anarchist stance met with approval from my social science teacher intrigues me. I'd like to hear the compelling arguments behind your position.
Okay.
This might not fit in completely with the theme of your podcast, so I completely understand if you don't want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And then he writes, I don't know if you notice, he says MVH Oliver, and that stands for Melvenly Hilsen, which translates to with friendly greetings.
Okay.
Oliver.
I think he wrote another email after that as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he said, I'd like to swiftly adjust my question a little. Pat's anarchist as well as anti-capitalist stance.
Okay, I'm going to, first of all, Oliver, thank you very much for your emails. I'm going to put the two of them together, and I think what you're basically asking me is why I'm an anarchist via the lens of capitalism, effectively. It's a big question, and I can only answer it succinctly here. We don't have a huge amount of time, but just to break it down for you, if you're interested, anarchism is, at its most fundamental level, the refusal of coercive hierarchy. So capitalism is probably one of the best examples of coercive hierarchy that exists in the modern world. And probably the other best example is specifically the state, the nation state. And these two concepts basically articulate and work extremely efficiently as a system to control and manipulate populations. So by coercive hierarchy, and there are multiple interpretations of what this means, in anarchist circles. But again, basically what it means is it's a system that forces you to behave in a certain way. You have no choice. You are coerced. So capitalism is an ideology held in place by a network of apparatus such as works, banks, mortgages, shops, and so forth. You can't do much in life without paying. In reality, I mean, this concept is now so entrenched, for example, that schemes such as free public transport, which we now have in Montpellier, are seen on a European level as radical and experimental. We are talking about like getting a bus. So I really try to think about that. I think it's important. What this basically means is that, it's seen as radical that you should be able to move around without paying. But even if you have already paid in terms of tax. So just to illustrate, that you basically can't do anything without money. And if you want to test the validity of that statement, obviously try living without it. And I think you'll probably see very quickly that it really isn't possible to live any kind of like comfortable life in Western civilization unless you do as you're told, that you generate and spend money.
You can start by perhaps reading Down and Out in Paris and London.
You could start there. That is a cracking book. That is an absolute...
So you don't have to do it yourself. But,
you could do that, and I would absolutely recommend it. That is
just so you know, that is a book. That's George Orwell, the guy who wrote 1984 and Animal Farm, and he basically lived as a homeless person on the streets in Paris and London and wrote about it.
The Paris bit is fantastic. The bit in Britain is amazing as well, but oh my God, it's absolutely amazing. So yes, Oliver, read that book. So, people that endorse capitalism as an extension, or who tell you, as they have done, that capitalism is essential to the functioning of contemporary society are, in my opinion, literally endorsing a form of slavery. You have to work, basically, and if you accept this argument, I think it's logical to consider that the entire concept that we can't live without money is fundamentally and morally repugnant. Yes, it's very easy for us living in our privileged, rich societies to think in a way that capitalism works. But I would say to anyone that endorses capitalism in the West that they are sitting on the top of a very tall and very bloody heap. A world driven by capitalism, in my opinion, Oliver, is fundamentally unjust, and anarchism, or libertarian communism to give it its more modern name, is centered directly on the concept of social justice. I'm just going to give you a couple of references because...
libertarian communism, that's nuts. So that is just nuts.
That's a different conversation.
That's like all the way to the left and all the way to the right, and then meeting.
No. You're getting confused there.
Sorry,
Oliver, I'm going to give you a couple of references because anyone that's interested, I do like to pass the word on. There's a book called "What is an Apparatus?" It's called in English. It's an essay written by a guy called Giorgio Agamben. He was an Italian philosopher, still is an Italian philosopher. He's really old now. He's about 80 something, I think. But it's an essay about defining social apparatus and how they use to modify behavior and to control people. And he talks about capitalism in there. It's a really, really interesting, very lucid piece of writing. It's definitely worth reading. Also, there's a guy called Daniel Guérin. He was a French anarchist, a gay French anarchist. He's dead now. I can't remember, I think he was like early 20th century, who compiled an amazing book called No Gods, No Masters, an Anthology of Anarchism. And that charts the birth of anarchism, which appears, of course, and hilariously in response to the exploitation engendered by industrialization in the 19th century. Anarchism was a response to money. It's important to remember that. It's an absolutely amazing book. I really recommend it. And finally, there's another guy called Murray Bookchin, who was an American anarchist. He's dead now, unfortunately, who invented a concept called social ecology. And his thinking was actually the basis of what is called today eco-anarchism or green anarchism. And it's absolutely fascinating. He wrote in English, obviously, and really, really fundamental. If you want to try to think about how we can live in a different fashion than the ecologically disastrous forms of capitalistic nationalism that we see around us today. So, to answer your question, Oliver, why am I an anarchist and why am I an anti-capitalist? It's because I'm fundamentally opposed to coercive authority, and I believe we should only do things if we really want to. I don't believe that you or anybody else should have the right to tell me what to do. It's that simple. So, many thanks for your email, and I hope that goes some way to starting to answer your question. I really hope you continue to read on it.
And let's never, ever mention anarchism again.
Let's go. Go anarchism.
Yay.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually thinking in the wake of our last podcast and about the kind of, about what this podcast is, Pat. I was having a kind of an existential, what is this podcast? Yeah, and at the top of the show, I love saying that, at the top of the show, you said it's about national identity, which it is, but
in a way.
But I also think it is, and I'm going to actually quote you from the Queen is Dead episode. It really is kind of anti-vertical hierarchy.
That is it. That is pretty much,
and obviously maybe being foreign and the things we talk about puts us in a kind of position where perhaps that vertical hierarchy is a lot clearer to us.
Yep.
Because of certain things. Again, I'm not going to compare myself to even Nerma, who I just interviewed, and anyone from who's like Muslim or from an Arab country. But still, those vertical power structures become a lot clearer. And I think a lot of our topics have, in a way, all been about that. Rather than actually perhaps being foreign or national identity.
I think that's a completely legitimate thing to say, Mike. And so I'm about to move on to a thesis. I'm doing my master's at the moment, and my thesis will be research into, in a way, national identity. It was one of the reasons that we started this podcast, is because it's something that we share in common, is that we're not from the countries in which we live, and even though there are very particular aspects to certain foreigners' situations, such as, for example, Muslim people or the Jews in the Holocaust or people who fled from Bosnia. There is a universal aspect to being foreign. I think it's I think you're absolutely right and justified to say what you have just said. I agree with you. Email number 3. This is so this is from is this email number 3 or this is 3?
Yeah, this is email number 3.
This is from some lady called Sue. Yeah, apparently Sue. You know her.
Yeah, I do, and she's she's Sam's mother.
Hi,
and
Sue.
And mine. Yeah, hi, Mum. Says here, the subject is the headline of an article which she has sent to us, and it says here, France brings in stricter French language requirements for foreigners, and basically the only email is couldn't remember your podcast. She sent it to me and I forwarded it, but it doesn't matter. But yeah, there is an article here saying France brings in stricter foreign language requirements for foreigners, and I didn't know how recent that was, because I do remember you mentioning something along those lines on a previous episode.
Yeah,
but
yeah, I can talk. I'll talk about it quickly. Thanks, Sue, for your email. Hi, Sue.
Thanks, Mum. Yeah.
So the article that you've linked to is talking about, it's called the Loi Immigration, the immigration law, which is being talked about a lot in the French press at the moment. There was a version of it managed to sort of get through Parliament in France. It's all about sort of like hardening the law against immigrants, mainly from North Africa, effectively, but obviously it affects everybody that doesn't have a French passport. It got booted out as being unconstitutional, and 32 articles in it were actually rejected by the Constitutional Court in France on the 25th of January. And actually today, the centrist element in the French Parliament has put through another text, so that's got to go back. So it's still being sort of like not backwards and forwards, but the articles that were put back in do actually include. There's going to be a new requirement that I think people that are coming into France for reasons of family grouping are going to be required to have I can't remember what word was actually used. It's like a fundamental level of French, which basically wasn't there before. And there's other stuff in there about. It's basically going to be the time period for people that don't work to get certain benefits, including family benefits, is going to be extended to 5 years. So if women come over with children and can't work, they won't be able to get any money for 5 years. So yay France, woo! So that was sort of deemed to be unconstitutional for some reason. Yeah. Like that starving children thing. But that's been stuck back in and is going through. They're trying to get it through at the moment to stop people claiming family benefit if they don't work. So many thanks for your email, Sue, and I hope you send us some more.